Hey, what's up everybody? I am back. It's been a while. I think it's been like a year or maybe 2 years since the last time you see my face at least. Not too much has changed except for the fact I do have a new tattoo. Oh, damn, that's cool. Very cool. I'm wearing glasses now because your boy's getting unk status slowly. Yeah, no, these are blue light glasses. My eyes get very tired looking at screens all day, so I figured I'd get some blue light glasses, even though the actual like usefulness of them is very much debated, but you know, a little bit of placebo might work. So today we're going to actually be discussing a fun little video, I think, about Gaea and Blender. I thought I'd keep it very simple. Before we get into this, I just want to thank my beautiful, beautiful patrons. They're awesome people who kept this channel alive, and without them, I don't think I'd be doing YouTube at all. So yeah, if you've been wondering where I'm at mostly, it's on the Patreon and on Quad Spinner's channel. That's where I'm mostly at right now, working on videos and educational stuff. This is not anything new. My workflow isn't groundbreaking, but what I want to show you guys is just the way of going from Gaea to Blender, in this case, and how I would set that up, you know, from the Gaea to mountain creation, texturing in Gaea, to the Blender importing, texturing, lighting, rendering. Yeah, just kind of like that setup. We're gonna keep it basic, so we're not gonna set up huge scatters. I hope that's okay. For the scattering, I personally use GeoScatter, which is a paid add-on. So yeah, I don't know if it's very useful if I put that on the YouTube. What I will probably do is do like a separate GeoScatter kind of like beginning guide on the Patreon, because I know a lot of you guys there actually use GeoScatter. So hey, good for you guys too. So we're actually gonna get into this. I actually have very high production value now. I actually have a microphone, which is new. Ta-da! And then next to that, we actually have a beverage showcase camera, which is beautifully deep fried. It's also inverted, so you're gonna have to read it with a mirrored. Just hold a mirror up to your screen and try to see that. The beverage for today is a Le Cafe cappuccino. It's a very high quality cappuccino, and yeah, the cafe's name is just Cafe. So there you go. Okay, don't try to find me, please. But if you do run into me, don't be afraid to say hi. Now, enough about this. Look at that cool transition. Now, wait until you see this transition. Whoop, I'm in the corner. There we go. So yeah, this is pretty sick. However, I just realized that this is probably not a great place for me to be. So I'm just gonna, actually, you guys don't care if I'm up here. Oh, who cares if I'm saving files, right? That's weird. I actually don't feel comfortable being up in this corner, but whatever. Great coffee. So today, we're going to be breaking down some Indian Himalayas. I mean, the Himalayas kind of are everywhere, right? They're spanning a bunch of countries, but I just like to get specific for some reason and just typed in the Himalayas in India. Anyway guys, so let's get started with the reference. So we're gonna have a very simple reference here. Yeah, I just kind of mostly look at this image, and then I looked at this image, and I looked at this image. I was like, this is cool. I just wanted it a bit bigger, so I looked at this image. I'm like, that's a little too big, because that's like a full, you know, snowy ice peak. And then this is looking like something you could really do an erosion to with the shape settings. I was like, wow, this looks really cool. But yeah, I just got a few images, kind of get the vibes there, but mostly just looking at the colors here and the general shape. Okay, we get it. Let's get started. I mean, we have to have a little bit of creativity too. You know, it can't just be following the reference one-to-one. People are going to scold me for that, but yes, that's how I feel. So let's get started. For the Gaea part, I'm just going to go run through the nodes, and then for the actual Blender part, we'll just start building from scratch. I do that because in Gaea there's so many settings and sliders that can give you completely different results because everything is procedural, that I get a little bit panicky when I have to start from scratch. Without further ado, let's jump into this. And these things are baked, which we'll get into now. We're gonna unbake these. Unbake force, unbake all. There we go, yes. So we're gonna start off with a gabor. I actually talked about this in the trees tutorial recently on the quad spinner. But yeah, Aaron Westwood was like playing around with gabors, and then I was like, oh yeah, I never played with that primitive. It's kind of an interesting one. It kind of looked to me more like dunes, so I didn't really see a place for it. And then I was like, oh, actually, even though it looks very wonky to start with, it actually gives you very interesting like mountain ridges. The shape that it produces can be a little bit more, I guess, realistic for a real life large scale mountain range, as these ridges kind of like follow and flow. Yeah guys, so size 0.15. the entropy, which is a very odd way of saying, but if you put this to 0, you get just very basic waves, and the entropy kind of, you know, noises it up. And then entropy 0 is no waves or no warping whatsoever. The azimuth is basically just the direction, right? And then, or the rotation, I would say. So yeah, I put that to 97.25, and then gain at 0.5. So yeah, that's just like your regular controls here. But yeah, the Gabor, guys, use it. In my case, I mix between the Gabor and a ridge, which my ridge is just like a really flat, plain area, but I don't want a completely flat area because that is weird with simulations. And I use a linear gradient with a curve as a mask, so you can just see it like so. And then I use that to mask between the Gabor and the flat area, which you can already kind of see the idea shaping up, right? You're like, oh yeah, this is like a big plain, or I don't know, some kind of like flat area, and then this huge mountain range is building up from it. And you have these valleys that run into the mountains. Super cool. Well, let's get it. Next up, I'm going to warp. In my case, the warp will just be used with base settings. Yeah. And I'm just getting some detail on here because the Gabor is very smooth. So I like to add some little bit of detail for the simulation to play with. Next up, rivers. This will probably be one of the heavier things that we're going to use in this node stack. Rivers is great. We're just using base settings, except for full headwaters and 0.5 downcutting. So we're just creating these valleys. I think I did this in the past too. Like if you check my Patreon, I did like a thermal eroded mountainscape or something. And then crumble is just kind of adding on top of that. My crumble settings duration is 0.5, or in my case 0.51, but just use 0.5. Strength 0.8, horizontal 0.75. So the crumble, it kind of like digs further down onto the rivers here. So as you can see, the river here is not that deep, and the crumble just furthers it, but then upping the strength and then the horizontal, all of this, it just makes this valley wider and deeper. So you can see right now it's not that bad, and then we turn up this depth and we're going to see some major down cutting. Boom. So yeah, this is just creating cool like ravines almost, but what this is mostly doing is prepping the shape for erosion 2. So erosion 2 has the suspended load, and suspended load is like very light sediments that flow far down the mountain, but they definitely build up in these little areas, like right here. This area would be pretty filled up with sediment, which would kind of like bring up the valley floor, which you can turn the erosion 2 to only like max or min settings, I mean, and just only cut away. However, that's also not totally realistic because we're not getting any sediments. So this is kind of a way of prepping the shape and getting that deep valley cut in here so it can just fill it with sediments. Yeah, it's kind of a prep for me. And also it gives you very interesting shapes. Like we use the erosion here. So we can see this right here, this line, this is all like sediments kind of built up, but it's very light sediments. It's the suspended load. It's the lightest sediment. So they don't build up in a big pile, but they kind of, well, they do bring up this valley floor quite a bit, as you can see. And this cool thing here too is you get this micro detail right here of where the flow is kind of like cut in. So yeah, I mean, it's a cool micro detail, but it also preps your shape. Crumble just kind of prepares your shape for erosion 2. So it's less impactful on the valley floor here, and you get more deep valley floors. Okay, so erosion 2, this is where the magic is really going to happen. We go from a shape that looks nothing like the mountain to a shape that is very much a mountain. So yeah, erosion 2 shining, doing its best again to just give us these amazing shapes. So we're going to have a duration of 15, so it's a little higher. The downcutting is the basic same thing, and then the erosion skill is very low, 150. So this is because it's a huge terrain, we need the erosion skill to be lower. If you want to know more about each slider, then go to the Quad Spinner channel. There's a video on erosion 2 there too, where I explain everything in depth. But basically erosion scale, the lower it is, the larger scale the terrain is, and the higher scale your erosion scale is, the smaller scale the terrain you're working on is, kind of. Of course, you can get stylized with this. You can play around with this. You can stack up different erosion scales at different, behind each other and get cool results. But what it basically controls is the amount of these little, cuts that you're going to get, these hydraulic flow lines that are going to be cutting into your terrain. So at an erosion scale of 500, this is going to look super whack. Of course, we can put the shape up a bit, but the thing is just that you only get a few of these deeper valleys, like 1, 2, which, you know, sometimes is realistic, but for a huge mountainscape like this, these are, you know, kilometer big mountains, like massive, we need it to have a lot more micro details. So then you turn it down and now all of a sudden you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you know, 11 big flows on this one slope alone. So it's about the deep big flows. Of course, if we turn it up, there's still like these small little hydraulic lines, but the actual cutting down is, you know, larger scale. The valleys are bigger. For a large scale terrain, we want smaller valleys, more micro detail, you know. So yeah, you see these beautiful cuts. 150 is my kind of like number here, and then I don't change any of the sediment settings here. I'm pretty much happy with just these discharge angle, suspended load. It's looking good. I'm not really touching it. The only thing I need to play around with here is the shape controls, and I landed on beautiful numbers of 0.5, 0.9, and 0.1. And I'll just copy this node and just show you all the variations you can get. So here we go. So the shape control is going to just, this is the general strength of this thermal shaping. If we turn this way down, our mountain is going to be a lot more bulky again. There we go. And then when we turn this way higher, it's going to start kind of getting weird and wacky. We're going to get these little artifacts and stuff showing up. But these artifacts are not necessarily a bad thing, because they actually create extremely intricate cliff faces when dialed in. And that's where I kind of meant about this, like one mountain right here. Yeah, these kind of shapes are very much possible with erosion too, with this high thermal shaping settings here. Yeah, because you kind of get these weird, very steep cliff faces peering out. And yeah, so that's where we can use, like, dial in this shape control together with this shape sharpness and the shape detail scale to kind of get these cliffs. And it's maybe hard to see here right now, but you can see you have these cliff faces right here at the peak. And yeah, you can play around with it. Every number is going to give you quite varied results. So that's where we actually get to the next node, which is a choke point, which I renamed Bake to Be Sure. This basically just means the shit will change. Every simulation changes a little bit. However, the shape controls right here are prone to change a lot more than if you don't use them at all or use them at a very low strength. So if we use the shape sharpness at like 0.13 and 0.25, this is not going to change that much between resolutions compared to like really high levels of the shape control. It's because the shape control is just very aggressive. I feel like it's very strong shaping controls, which in turn cause the tiniest little difference. So when you scale up the terrain, you know, it's different. There's resolution differences. So there's, you know, a bit more detail somewhere, and that's going to change the whole simulation. It's never 100%. And if you thought erosion 1 from Gaea 1 is, you know, 100% the same, it's not. You should try it out. Between different resolutions, there's a slight deviation. It can be minimized, but it depends on how strong the erosion is. The stronger the erosion, the bigger the changes are going to get, because it just amplifies. So that's why these kind of controls, the shape controls, they can give us amazing results. I mean, look at this. This is insane. Cliff faces, like perfectly stacking up on this slope. It's looking so sweet. I mean, I'm loving this one right here, actually. I mean, do you see that these are tiny number changes? And look how big the shape changes are. So that's why we bake. When we actually have a shape that we like, right? We're in 4K, we're gonna be working with E2 because erosion 2 is very fast in 4K for most people. You will bake in 4K, and I'll show you in a sec how to. And then we can continue with our stack. Sorry guys, I'm just yapping about how cool this is, but I'm trying to get you on something. And then shape detail scale. This, if we put this higher, we're gonna lose a bunch of those cliffs, see? So it's actually like, if you put this up to like 0.2, you're pretty much out of the clear. You're totally not getting those kind of shapes anymore. If we put this to 0.1, you're gonna slightly see a bit of like steepness forming, but still not a lot. So yeah, I mean, this is great if you want to keep some of that really, I don't know, coarse detail that you have on your mountain. You really want to keep some of those micro details, then use this, but do know that you're going to lose out on some of the cool shapes because it's like forcing your old shape through. If we just turn this all the way to the lowest, we're going to get the most sharp results from the erosion 2. So yeah, I normally stay at 0.01, You can up it maybe to 0.05, and on the higher ends, 0.1. If you get any higher than this, at that point, you're not gonna get any of those cliff results. You're just gonna, yeah, maintain all the cool rocky results, which might be what you're going for. But yeah, again, these shape controls are super cool, so awesome. You can get so many cool results with it. In our case, we got this with the 0.5, 0.9, and 0.01, and I locked it in. So now we're gonna bake, because as I said, this is quite unstable. So we're gonna click on here. This is my choke point. I added a choke point, renamed it. You don't have to, you can just click on the erosion too, but I did it. And we're gonna select the resolution we wanna bake at. I bake at 4K because that's what I'm seeing, so I know what I'm gonna get. And I say bake selected nodes, 10 nodes. It's gonna be 1 gigabyte of data, so just keep that in mind. It is gonna cache everything, and that's gonna, well, be a little bit. Alrighty, so now that we've baked it, which would be really quick, if you're already in 4K and you bake at 4K, it just saves whatever you have, so it should be quite quick. We're gonna add a bit more detail. Now the erosions part are done, so we can just add details and smaller simulations, and it shouldn't be too drastic. We have a beautiful shape to work with, so let's get started. My first thing is, these peaks are just a little boring. They're just quite smooth. I wanna make it crazy. So my favorite technique, which I've already showed in various tutorials on my channel and on Quad Spinner, is Voronoi on top of our terrain, just to add cool, rigid detail. So we're gonna have a scale of 0.9 Euclidean. We could change it to Manhattan, but because I want them to be kind of sharp, jagged, it's okay to use Euclidean here. Clamp down to quite a low number, 0.03. Frequency a little higher, so a bit more like warping, so 0.07. Keep this very low because this is very sensitive. And then the scale 12 by 12, so we're just scaling it down massively to have this a very sharp looking terrain. And then we're going to use the peaks and set the precise, and then blurred by 0.2, and then a curve to just make my selection a bit more clamped down on this mask and just get the actual peaks selected, still keeping a nice fall off. And then transpose this on top, and the transposing I set to embed. So if I transpose regularly, it's going to cut down and up. So my terrain is going to go like this. When I embed, it's basically like an additive function, so it's just going to add on top these extra peaks. So that's what I'm doing. Embed, amount 0.4, and extend 0.5, which extend is going to push it up further. So now we're getting these super cool rigid peaks. I mean, look at that. Okay, so there you go. Looking sweet. I mean, look at that peak before. Boring. After, ooh, now we're talking. I'm sorry, I'm being very excited, but I just love adding these kind of like details that kind of carry the rest of the shot. It's very minor still, but just this rocky peak is gonna look so much better than this kind of smooth one in our case, in our scenario. In some cases, this smooth peak is gonna be absolutely perfect, but I'm trying to make this be like a rocky, snowy mountain. So I want that rock to be jutting out a bit. And I also look at my reference yet again, and I'm like, okay, well, this is quite big, but even looking here, like the rock is jutting out quite a bit. Looking here, you see these rock things jutting out from the actual slope here. So yeah, here, for example, it's quite smooth, but that's also covered in snow. So yeah, just looking at my reference, being like, okay, I want those rocky things jutting out. So I'm gonna add that with a Voronoi. Then thermal shaper, time to bulk up this terrain, because right now it's very exponential. It's very like gradual, and then steep, which gradual, and then steep, So that's something that the erosion will kind of give you naturally, kind of thin peak in a sense, which is, partially realistic. I mean, there's definitely, an argument to be made that this could be realistic. In my opinion, I just want these mountains to be a bit more bulky, I want them to be a bit more, have a bit more, dare I say it, girth. All right, so we're gonna use the thermal shaper to give them some girth. Yes. So very easy. Influence 0.4. This is just your genuine general strength of this this thing, and then the shape 0.5. So normally it's a minus setting, but this time it's a 0.5. So it's actually bulking up the terrain. Scale I set to 75. The scale is very interesting. We can get very small scale thermal shaping, which bulks up like the micro detail, and then as you scale further up, it will bulk up like the entire terrain. So here, 250, it kind of works actually, but it's like bulking up the entire slope. Like everything is being bulked up. As I turn this down, it's only these individual peaks. As I turn it further down, it becomes like the individual valley. Kind of, as you can see here, this thing is bulking up by itself. As I turn it further down, it's just starts bulking up smaller and smaller details, which I love about the thermal shaper now. The fact that we have such individual control over what parts of our terrain are being bulked up. Yeah, I mean, you could turn it up all the way maybe if you like the look. I just played around and I thought, okay, 75 was looking like a sweet spot right here. So yeah, did that. Warping it, actually height remap. Oh no, I didn't touch this. I do that later. So warping it, this is just micro detail, very small size, 0.1, and then a high roughness. So just very micro grainy detail, because I just felt like it was a bit too smooth and we're about to like add some details to this terrain. So doing that. Then I'm taking the slope here, which is a black selection actually, but it's because the warp is actually on top. And then the original base layer is on the bottom. So everything that's black will be the new layer of this warped kind of rocky detail. Again, looking at the reference, I'm gonna pull that right back up. You see all of this rocky detail. We see a lot of this rocky detail, rocky detail, rocky detail. Sorry guys, just keep repeating myself. I'm probably very annoying, but yeah, the rocky detail. So what we're doing is we're taking the max details here, so just getting the stuff that's jutting out. I'm using 2 iterations, so it's kind of like warping twice in 2 different directions normally. Size very low, strength 0.1, roughness is all the same, and then I use Voronoi P. It's just one of the Voronoi shapes that you can get. And yeah, it's, as you can see, it's just adding a little rocky outcropping, very small but visible. And I'm just putting that on the slopes, so not anywhere else, just the slope areas. So the next thing we're gonna add is some more rock detail. Again, just taking the slope output. This one is a bit of a smaller selection, so not 25, but 40. Blurred, and the shaper is pushing the darks a bit. And then with this mask, we're adding fractal terraces. And I tried sandstone, but I wasn't that impressed. And fractal terraces are looking great, and you can modulate them or kind of warp them inside of the node now with the tilt. So fractal terracing is just kind of something you see in a lot of mountains, and it's not always as visible, but it's pretty much always kind of like playing a part in the sense that, you know, mountains form because 2 plates are pushing against each other, going up, and then exposing all their, you know, layers of sediment as they, you know, kind of through the earth. So that's where we get those terraces. You know, you see kind of like you see the layers of all the different sediment and rock and whatever that's stacked on top of each other. Some places it's more noticeable, and other places it might not be the same rock layer or whatever, so it erodes differently. It's all different, but in my case, I feel like adding a little bit of it, not super obvious, you know, like the Rocky Mountains, you need to add an obvious like terracing effect because that's visible in the Rocky Mountains. In the Himalayas, in this case, it's kind of there, but it's so, the rock is very smoothed out due to like very high thermal erosion from ice and snow and, you know, temperature changes. So it's kind of different, but there is definitely still layers of sediment, I guess, being pushed up. So yeah, I love adding this kind of detail, even if it's very small. So yeah, in my case, it is very little, but I love this effect. So I applied the tilt. I made the tilt quite strong with 0.75, and then I warped it, warp amount and warp size. So the warp doesn't really work when you don't use tilt, but when you have quite a lot of tilt, it actually can give you some really interesting like modulation. And I just played around with it. You know, you can use the seed and whatever to play around with it. I ended up getting kind of a modulated look that looked super cool. So on these slopes, it was kind of like matching, I don't know, it just kind of felt like it was matching the shape very well. Here especially, look at this, like it's matching this, like these erosive flows. The terracing is like matching it again, kind of going upwards with it. Here again, I mean, look how it's like very kind of cool way it's going up with it. And yeah, especially this was like my golden part that sold me on it. This exact cliff face right here just got that awesome like stratification put into it. I don't know, it just helps like make the terrain feel a lot more real, because there seems to be like real geological like stuff happening that makes my brain like, wait, what? So yeah, just getting lucky with that seed there. And of course also using the tilt in the right direction kind of got my mountain looking good, pretty sweet. Really good micro detail to have in your terrain, which will be super visible with snow. I think that's like a thing, like snowy mountains have a shit ton of micro detail because the contrast really exposes the smallest shapes, you know, the contrast of the snow with the rock. I mean, this is never visible. If there wasn't snow, you wouldn't be looking at this, but all this rock detail that just like warping and protruding in weird ways, that's all micro detail that is so important when you're making a snowy mountain, because the snow enhances that shape so much, which is why snowy mountains are so cool, because just the detail and the richness of a snowy mountain is so cool. But it's also a challenge because while in this area you could get away maybe with like a warbly texture and whatever, in this area you need the 3D detail for that snow to actually show these little rock thingies warbling around. So you need to add all these kind of small elements and like hyper analyze your reference and see what they have. So I'm here, I'm like, okay, Voronoi, fractal terracing, and then I look at these kind of like warbly bits here and here and here and on here, and I think, okay, we need to warp my terrain with a very small amount, you know, very small numbers, just everything to make that micro detail pop. So doing all that and saying all that, now it's time to kind of make this stuff shape better, because right now it's all just thrown on top. We're taking a slope mask here to put in our area mask of the thermal 2. I'm just masking out 45 degrees, so it's a pretty good selection of just all the steeper areas. And you can see already like, oh yeah, that's all the micro rock detail. We're seeing the lines, right? Right here, you're seeing the lines. You're seeing the warbly stuff. You're seeing more of those fractal lines. You're seeing the Voronoi peeking out over there. Perfect, it's looking good. If you want, you can make the selection a bit broader, so there's a bit more black area, but I was thinking this is looking pretty sweet. And we're adding a very light thermal erosion with all the sediment removed, just to kind of blend everything better into the terrain. So what we're seeing here is very minor stuff. Feature skill 5, angle 45, sediment removal 0.5, duration 0.15, and this is all basic stuff. And what this is just gonna do is kind of merge all the details into the terrain better, because they have had a little bit of thermal erosion on top. As you can see here, it's just kind of noisy and a bunch of warbly stuff, and now everything is kind of flowing again because we added a layer of erosion, I guess, on top. In our case, thermal erosion, which is realistic for the snow and ice and whatever it's gonna meet on the outside there. So yeah, everything is kind of merging nicely again, but very light. Don't overdo this thermal erosion, it's gonna look weird. Very light. Rivers, this is just to add some cool rivers. Very low down, or no down cutting at all. Headwaters 200 and -2 river valley, so it's not like a very broad river valley. And this is just to create this kind of river flow. It's only cutting in a little bit here, and I even turned the influence down because it was cutting in too deeply in this area right here. So I turned the influence to 0.5, and that's it. There's just a slight little bit of erosion from the rivers, just making a nice little effect right here, for example, too. Yeah, I like it. Then the snow is going to be the duration 0.15 and intensity 0.1, so again quite light. Then the settle duration 0.5, melt is turned off, snow line 0.18. Just play around with these settings. What is important is that I turned the slip off angle up to 40, so snow will stick more to the tops a bit better. And the adhered snow mass I turned down to 8, so it's kind of like a trade-off. I will have the snow stick more to the terrain, I guess. But at the same time, I'm saying less snow is sticking to the terrain. This is just giving us a little bit more of this small grouping on top, but the major flows are still further down the mountain. And we're gonna fill up most of our snow on the top of the mountain with dusting, because dusting is way better at giving us micro detail. Dusting is so good at giving us that micro detail you see in all the reference, like this kind of stuff. Impossible with the snow, because this is more for like deep snow, you know, like big snowy areas like so maybe. Actually, I would do this with snow field node, like this area. Big deep piles of snow like this right here. This is what the snow node can do. But then all this kind of like grainy stuff, or even on top here, this kind of grainy stuff, I would do that with dusting. I think dusting is the best to have at all these little grainy areas. because dusting gives you that grainy snow texture. So definitely use dusting. Then influence 0.75 because I don't want a completely smooth snowy area. If you turn this, like if it's 100%, the snow is just no detail. So I turn it to 0.75, so some of that rock detail below is kind of protruding through still. Then effects, we're actually scaling up the mountain. In Blender, I kind of scaled it up and it was like, okay, I need to scale it up at 1.25 for just general scale. So boom, from here to here, just multiplying. It's not doing too much, but it's making this look a lot more imposing and crazy. And yeah, really loving the look. Shape out. And here we go with the texturing. Fun times. So I have a portal on the snow here, and I also use a portal on the shape. So just heads up, we're using portals. If you want to know how to use a portal, you press P, and then there, out, in. So you can add a portal to the input or make a portal on the output of a node. Very cool, very easy, cleans up your node network a bit. Now for the texturing here, we're going to use a texturizer. Now, a texturizer is a bit hard to visualize, I won't lie, it's pretty much just a gray mess. However, when we then add it to a sap map, we get these amazing sap map results, just super detailed, super cool. So my texturizer setup right now is I, 0.5 factor, then a secondary 0.15, and then the components are 0.5 on the flows, 0.65 on the slope, and 0.2 on the soil. I don't know, it's just like playing around, having it plugged into the sap map, and that gave me the best results. I highly recommend not using the base settings on the texturizer. A is kind of a boring texture, I think. H is a pretty good one, G is good. Just choose one of them, and then have the secondary with a very like small amount, like 0.15, because if it's 0.5, 0.5, they kind of match each other out and it just becomes boring. So 0.5, 0.15 is a good blend. I'm like a coffee roaster right now, speaking of coffee. It's a good blend. And then the components, flows, well, I like seeing the flows, and at the same time, reference. Look at that, I see flows. So I want to have the flows visible. Then slope, well, yeah, look at the rock here. It seems to be a bit different of a gradient, a bit darker. So I want slope to be visible. And soil, I don't know. Soil kind of just fades everything out into one color. So if you want a detailed sap map with a bunch of crunchy details, I think keeping soil quite low will be more beneficial to you. And this gave us this sap map. I'm using the 413 on the rock, and I'm using roughness at low, so it's gonna warp our sap map a little bit, give it a bit more detail. There you go, very rough, very rocky looking. Then we're gonna use extra color sap map, and you might think, what? This is 411 on the rock. And this one just has a bit more of that yellow color that we saw in the reference. And I thought, well, I love the detail on this one, but I love the color on this one. So we're just gonna blend it with an overlay, set to 0.75 to just kind of like bring over that color and just get that richness into this main detail sap map, and use this extra color sap map. Boom, there we go. Very cool colors. We're not done yet. HSL, we're gonna do a few adjustments. This is kind of a tough one because in Blender, this looks totally different than it looks in Gaea. So any adjustments here, keep them very minor, like just slight hue adjustments, slight saturation, lightness adjustments. The major adjustments to color, we're gonna have to make in Blender because the viewport and the color management space and everything you're using is just different. So this HSL thing is just, don't make big changes and expect your sap map to just work in Blender. You're probably gonna have to use an HSV node and curves and whatever in Blender to make it work better. I use 0.75. Then the blend is just blending between the base, like previous layer, and the color erosion. I set it to 1 all the time. Color hold is basically just how long these flows are gonna keep going. So it's kind of hard to see. I think you can kind of see it here. Some of these colors are just gonna keep going for quite a while. It's kind of hard to visualize, but the longer the color holds, just the bigger streaks we're gonna get from a single color going down. And yeah, flow volume I kept low because I don't want to have, if we turn up flow volume, these little flows, these brown ones, are gonna get just thicker. So that's pretty much it. I don't need them to be that thick, so I kept it low. No diffusion, no laminar flow. And that's it. Now, this could be our color, but actually what I'm using in Blender is a fun little mix, because I thought, okay, this is great. You know, color erosion gives us amazing details, However, it just lacks a bit of the grainy detail I like to see in my sap maps. And grainy detail can be very good. Like if stuff looks too smooth, yeah, it just feels like it's lacking micro detail. So I take the original HSL here, or the original color, and I use an overlay on top of my color erosion. There you go. So I set it to 0.5, so it's not blending 100%, but it's bringing back a bunch of that grainy detail. We're still seeing the flows, and we're still seeing like how, you know, these things are kind of flowing down the mountain, but there's just a grainy detail added to it, which makes it a lot more rocky and rugged. Now, the problem is that overlay also makes our brightness go down and our saturation go up. So everything just becomes very, very, well, crazy. I mean, look at this. It just becomes very dark and saturated. So HSL again, bring the saturation down. I could have also brought the brightness up, but honestly, again, it's hard to tell how bright something should be inside of Gaea when you're going to export it to Blender. And in Blender, I think I turned the saturate or the brightness down even further. So yeah, hard to tell, but that's the color, and it's going to I call the export here color experimental. So if you're wondering what these nodes are, these are export nodes, and you choose what you want to export as. You can rename it, and then this is the stable way of exporting. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the snow. So yeah, the snow here, we're going to use dusting, and then we're going to run it through a color erosion with no transfer distance, full blend, and full diffusion. This is just going to turn that super sharp dusting mask into something a bit more kind of noisy and soft. And then we're going to add our old snow with this like combined, set the screen, and then that's our snow output right there. Snow export set to JPEG as well. We're going to have a mesher. Mesher is set to 4096 adaptive, create normals, create UVs. This is going to give us a 4 million vertice output, which is very high quality. It basically matches like a 17 million vertice terrain, I guess, with detail, but maybe even more detail, because it really focuses all the detail around the parts where you need it. So your rocks and stuff are going to have super good detail. Only problem is your snow might be a little kind of chunky. You see, like sometimes you can see the vertice lines, like the individual planes in the snow, because that's so little shape there. So if you have a problem with that, you can just get a height map, which is just this here, export node, set the height or name to height, and then set to EXR. This is our height map. If you want to use that instead and just subdivide your terrain a bunch, you won't have any problems with like obvious adaptive subdividing. Now flow, I actually didn't use this, but this could be a good mask. So flow length 22.6, flow volume, curve it, and flow. And then for fun, I actually did something here. I gave you guys like a showcase of how the trees would work. So I'm just gonna show you guys real quick. So there's no trees in my reference, so I'm not gonna have any trees on my terrain, maybe some bushes or something, but I didn't do that. So what I'm doing is just showing to you guys. What I'm taking here is a map. I did this in the trees tutorial on Quad Spinner 2, so if you want to see that, check it out there. But here I'm just doing a slope selection, height selection, right? I invert it so it's white and black, then color erosion, just to get those flows, curve to make everything a bit more like clamped down, then adding the flow map from this one, and this is our inhibition mask on the trees, and there you go. Tree settings, pretty basic, 500,000, tree size very small, trim under 0.15, and then the altitude actually kind of made it like 0.1, so it's like only growing in this one section and nothing on this flat area here. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't use these trees, like I didn't use it. You could maybe if you're doing Alps. I just wanted to show you guys because I mean making Alps could be somewhat similar to this setup, so adding trees could look like this, could be pretty cool, but in our case we didn't. What I did do is take the portals to the color and snow, and I combined it and I plugged it into the light X node so I could view it in all its beauty. I actually set the light settings exactly the same as Blender. I'm using Blender 5.0 and I'm using the new sky, so you can set the azimuth and the elevation to the same exact number and visualize these shadows in your mountain. There you go guys, that's the Gaea part, and now we'll hop into Blender 5.0, which has some issues. But guys, anyway, we're gonna be Blender 5.0 soon and we're gonna go through all of that there. See you. Alright guys, so it's another day and we're fresh and ready to go. We're gonna get into Blender. We're using Blender 5.0 and I'll quickly go over some settings that might be useful here. So my color management settings, I have, well, display sRGB, view I'm using ACES 2, the look I'm using none of them, and I'm using the ACES linear. I'm also personally using the pixel manager, OCIO, which is like a little different, but ACES 2 and linear ACES should be an option for you as the working space and the view transform. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be using in this case, and we're going to be pretty much using everything else inside of Blender. I will plug some Patreon things because I do make assets. I make your life a little easier with those assets. If you are a Sky Scholar or higher Patreon tier, you get these assets, and yeah, it ranges from foliage all the way to Atmos systems and just kind of those kind of things to get your environment kind of jump started. But in our case, I'll show you how to do most of it just, well, right here in Blender. So I'm personally going to import the mesher. A lot of people will use height maps, which is totally fair, but I just want to use the mesher. I love the detail that you get out of a mesher. Plus you can instance it because it's already one object. It doesn't use a modifier, so instancing it is no problem. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, I'm just gonna be blurring all of this, but inside of my working folder, I save my Gaea output. So yeah, I don't want to have all my Gaea exports like stacking up and stacking up and stacking up. So what I do is I save the Gaea files inside of my working folder. That way, in the future I can clean out my Gaea folder because those builds are very heavy. And if you don't do that, you can easily, rack up 100 gigabytes worth of, exports from Gaea. So just a little tip on file management. So now that we have imported this mesh, you'll see that it's 1 by 1 meters and the rotation is wrong as well. So first I'm going to shade it flat. Shading flat is just a great way to get all those details. Shading smooth is totally okay if you feel like, you need these like smooth snow to really be smooth. In that case, I would personally use the height map version and just subdivide everything equally. The reason why it could be a problem with this adaptive mesh, the snow is a kind of a smoother area, so the adaptive subdivisions are less on the snow. So then the individual faces become a lot more noticeable when we shade flat. So personally, if you really are going to be close to a terrain, I would use just the subdividing method that we all know, and just use a height map. But when you use a whole terrain like this and you kind of want to populate your background, it's nice to have the mesher because we can just instance this and it has no extra data. So yeah, that's why I often use the adaptive mesher in my scenes, because it's just high detail, quite low vertex count, and at the same time you can instance it very nicely. Well, you can see that the details out of this mesher are just looking absolutely amazing. I mean, we're going past this ridge line here and you have these cool rocky outcrops from that Voronoi. I mean, look at the stratification here. It's all looking very, very sweet. I mean, I'm loving the shape. It's looking super good. However, it's a bit small, so what we're gonna do is scale this up to something that will be realistic. Realistic scale is important. So look at your transforms here and check here, 1 by 1 meters, not realistic. So don't start working in a space like this. Lighting, everything, like scattering, it's all gonna be weird, like if we, use a wrong scale. So don't scale up like, oh well, mountains, so like 200 meters, that's not a mountain. Like 38 meters in height, that's the Netherlands, that's like a Dutch mountain. We need a real mountain size. So what I'm gonna scale it up as is by 8,000. So now we're talking 8,000 times scale. So what we're getting here is this terrain is now 8 by 8 kilometers and its height is 1.5. Maybe that's a little high, who knows, maybe 5 by 5 kilometers is more reasonable. But I think when it comes to the Himalayas, this is not that wrong. However, at this scale, we're gonna see a little bit of weird clipping. To fix this kind of stuff, go to your view here, and I changed it to 0.1 normally, and I have this set on default to 100,000. You guys will probably have it set to 1,000 on default, which you'll see the clipping at this size very easily. Just add 2 zeros, boom. I changed my focal length to work at 35 millimeters because I just love to see a bit more. Yeah, you can just change your focal length inside of the viewport. which would help you navigate a bit better. Yeah, so there we go. There's our terrain. Now we're gonna apply the scale. We're gonna apply rotation. So now we have everything set to 1 here. The scale rotation is 0. It's all good. Perfect. Now I'm gonna start just quickly setting up a lighting system here. And for the lighting, we're gonna be using the beautiful new sky texture from Blender 5.0. It is so awesome. I love this sky texture. First, it's gonna be blinding. So we've strength 0.2, and the sun we can stay at 1. And we have this new setting, multi-scattering or multiple scattering. That's the new sky texture in 5.0. And it's so awesome. It's so much better than single. Single scattering is so dull and ugly. Multiple scattering, you finally get that beautiful blue. The single scattering, the issue is always just the absolute like overwhelming yellow hue coming through, and with multiple scattering, boom, fixed. We have a beautiful sky right here. It actually works. Now inside of Gaea, you already saw that I changed the sun rotation to a certain rotation because I already set that up. I know my lighting angle. So here, 210 is going to be the angle because I love how it catches these ridges over here. I love how it catches the mountain on the right. And the sun elevation, we set it to 30. There we go. That's our lighting. It's very overwhelming right now because it's all white. But here you can see the shape a bit better. And we're already seeing how beautiful the shape came through. It's really looking sweet. Let's make a material for this mountain. So we're gonna call this the mountain material. I was gonna just straight up copy what I did already for the animation that you guys saw, but I think I'm just gonna freestyle it. I mean, I pretty much know what I wanna get, and it's fun to freestyle with you guys. So again, let's bring in some reference. We have the reference that we had last time, but this time we also have some more reference. We have some reference regarding the rock, which the rock is not super visible, but it's a cool way of visualizing the rock. Because in the past, I remember I did a texturing video and I was still very much a beginner as well, to be honest. Maybe intermediate, but definitely not as good as I am now. And even now I have a lot to learn. But at that point I was like cranking up the bump and stuff, just getting those details out, which was very cool. I, didn't know I could do that with bump. But yeah, it's not super realistic. I mean, you can see at this distance, like you see a tiny bit of like bump detail, I guess, right here. But most of the mountain, it just looks pretty flat. The detail comes within the color that you have there. So that's why I try to focus a lot more on my Gaea texturing nowadays, because those macro colors and stuff are very important. Here we have a cool look of a cliff face in the Himalayas, and nice, we have a human for scale. We can see the layered rock. It is layered, but it's not exactly the same type of layering we see in the Rocky Mountains where it's very straight. The layering here seems very warbly and going everywhere, so we'll have to find a rock texture that kind of has that there, and Quixel has those, so we're going to use Quixel textures. I think Quixel has the best textures for terrains, we all know it. I'm going to grab a few. I'm sorry if it's all blurry, I'll tell you guys what it is, but yeah, basically I'm just going to check first. I don't want you guys to see all my files. I'm sorry, boys. I value my privacy. Alright. Hey guys, so all the loading of textures is kind of done. Sorry, I had to go looking for a few options that, you guys can see in the reference kind of makes sense. So looking at this reference, of course, I went for kind of smoother concrete, but then I had two options. One is kind of my go-to favorite, and then another one was looking quite good and had more macro details, but less micro. There's not that much detail when you just look at the mountain straight on. The terrain is, there's a slight variation, but it's quite, uniform. It's not super crazy or anything. It's just kind of gray. So the Gaea texture will really bring in the macro details if we use this one. If we get closer, however, you see that it's a kind of a rough concrete, right? Like a concrete with a very kind of rough grain to it. And it just looks really good because it has that kind of gritty, rough detailing that is really nice on terrains. So there's that. This is really a good candidate, and that's why it's one of my favorites. I'll put the code on the screen here. It's however, I think I'm going to go for the other candidate, however, which is a way smoother concrete, but it has a lot more of these macro details. which are these brown splotches here, and it has some cracks, these crack lines and that kind of stuff. I'm running the 4K right now. I'm probably going to switch this to a 2K because we want to do the smart thing and save as much VRAM and on these textures that are going to be blended away so much that you're probably not going to notice a lot of the kind of blurriness of a lower resolution. So use 2K, my bad there with using 4K. This one is really nice because it just has more macro detail. It has more interesting splotches in random places that just can carry your terrain a lot further. Now looking at the reference, honestly there isn't that much of the splotchiness going on here, but I am noticing it in other reference imagery. So that's why I think I'm gonna go for that one, just because it's just a little cooler and the Gaea texture will carry it. However, the bump on this one is weak. It basically has no bump. If I turn this up to 5, 15, nothing is happening. So what I'm gonna do is take the math and multiply this by 100. Barely anything happened. 1,000. There we go. I had to multiply this by 1,000 to get some of that bump detail to show up. It has a very, very faded bump. It is also maybe a bit smooth looking, which could be good or bad. In my case, I love to have a bit of grain through my terrain. So what I'm going to do is take the object here and put it into a noise texture. I'm doing that so the noise texture isn't all warped and weird. I'm going to turn the noise texture scale to 1 because this is a massive object, so the texture is already going to be quite small. And I'm going to add this to the bump. So I'm bringing the bump over here, and we're going to just use two math nodes. So we're going to set one to add and this one to multiply. I'm going to put in the noise here and add that to our previous one, and you can see the noise right here is bringing in a bunch of detail. If I bring the detail up to like 5, I don't want to go too high because it could become quite slow, and the roughness of 5.55, something like that. We get that micro grainy detail on our terrain, which isn't really noticeable from a distance, but it's just it has a slight like fading, like, yeah, the great gritty detail that it adds. It's just very slight, but it will be apparent. So that's why I think it's important. So that's that. I think we have our bump kind of set to a good amount. It's already different from what I did for the animation you guys saw, but it's the same principles, exact same. I'm just using a different concrete texture this time, and the results might actually be better. So yeah, we take this setup and it's pretty much done. We just have to make sure the color is all right. Then we're gonna check this one. This is a really cool stratified rock texture, and well, even though we're supposed to triplanar project this, I freaking love this. Like, look how cool this is. I might use this rock texture in Gaea to color a road one day, because this just looks so cool having this. Like, I mean, I might just kind of like get creative and blend this in a little bit if I can. Could be really cool. I mean, seeing how it's like these stratified lines here, it's just really awesome to see. But yeah, in our case, it could be good for the reference, so I'll think about keeping this. But for now, I'm just gonna, it doesn't matter if we just copy and paste that and just keep it, but I'm gonna set this to a box projection, which is triplanar projecting, meaning we're gonna have good projection on the cliff or steep areas. So I'm just gonna change all of this to box, and now everything turns really tiny because our mesh is so massive. So we have to turn the scale down to like 0.001 or something super small, and the only place where we're really going to see it is on the cliff parts. That's really what matters right now. I'm liking how it's looking already. That's not bad. I don't know if we blend a little bit. Alt there. If we hold Alt, we can blend everything at once. We can blend a little bit. I don't know if it matters that much, but would make it a little bit less jagged looking. There we go. So that's going to be our cliff detailing, and we're going to add a bump here too. The reason why I'm bringing in AO, sometimes I just want to use the ambient occlusion, and sometimes I actually love like adding a bit more detail by blending in the color. But that's kind of like up in the air right now, so I'm just holding both, and if I don't use one, I'll remove it later. But for now, we're good. Let's see. This one also has quite weak bump. It's not very strong. Okay. Yeah, so we might actually need the AO quite well because the bump is not really working at all. It's not at all that strong. And we might also do the same thing where we add a little noise in between here. We'll just do the same little setup. You know, the thing is, nowadays I'm very much a person that kind of plays around with texturing a lot more than like having a very rigid, strict way of texturing something. I don't really think about my texturing in a way of like, oh, I have to follow these steps, otherwise it's not going to be good. I'm a lot more playing around with just getting a certain result that I see in a reference rather than having one specific way of texturing. So that's why doing these texturing tutorials, even now I'm doing it a little bit differently than the texturing I did for the animation you guys saw. And I'm doing that because it's fun and I'm learning something. There's all kinds of ways to get a good result. There's not one way that is acceptable. So yeah, I'd like you guys to know that. So we're pretty much ready to start bringing in the Gaea textures, which I'll do right now, which all we need is our color experimental. It's the one that we kind of mix with the overlay. Then I'm gonna bring in the snow map, and that's it. We don't need the like rock map or trees map or anything, just the snow. I don't know why, there we go. And we're gonna start mixing between these two in a second. I'll start with just here. What I like to do is bring in an HSV node, not a HSV, hue saturation value. And now we can make more good adjustments on this color map that is a bit hard to notice like in Gaea what exactly it will look like. As you can see now, it was quite red actually. It's quite red purplish. So what I want to do is turn this way more yellow, and I add the hue. I make it 525, so that's going to make this whole thing more yellow than red. So at this point we're going to just take the mix, and I'm going to start mixing this with the color of the sand there. And this is where it gets interesting, because we're going to take the Gaea and we're going to put it in the A slot. This is our main color, and we're just going to mix in that concrete color. We can use all kinds of ways. We can use overlay, we can use just a multiply, we can even screen or soft light. There's all kinds of ways we can bring in the detail. I personally like to use soft light or overlay, and then use an HSV node to kind of dial that in. Because right now what we're seeing is that our terrain texture is becoming very dark and very saturated. So add in an HSV before, and maybe just take away the saturation from that concrete node, because we don't want to bring in any of the color. We just want these cool details like right here. And I just think that's a cool detail. From a further distance it looks very cool. And like these little bits right here, super cool detail. Yeah, it's looking a bit too colorful still. So what you normally do is add an HSV afterwards too, and here we can do more in-depth control, but it's looking pretty decent right now. I'm going to check my reference real quick. This is already color graded, so it's kind of bad. This is also pretty color graded. This is a good one, however this one is a lot more dark. This is a pretty good one to look at. So the color is not bad, it's maybe a little too saturated, but we have to take into account that we're going to add atmosphere, which is this blue hue, which is going to mute a lot of these yellows a lot more, and the colors are going to be a bit more faded. So I think this might actually be good. I'm not going to touch it too much for now. I think we might be okay with this. I just want to see like here, just going to add a value node, it might be easier. Here I want to just see this scale, you know, we're going to play around with this scale. Okay, we can make it very small, which gives us a lot more micro details. Make it a lot larger. 3. Okay, well, I think we can just kind of keep it like this. It's really not a super big change. It's kind of like, do we want more micro detail or do we want less? Do we want more like macro detail? That's mostly the difference there. I think the macro detail is okay here, because I feel like when we have the snow and everything, we'll have enough micro detail already. So yeah, we're already looking good here. And now I'm just gonna bring the same kind of setup over to the rock. So looking at the rock here, and we're just gonna mix, first bringing in the hue saturation value, although we might want to keep a lot more of the color. And then I'm gonna bring in a mix node, mix color. Again, add the main Gaea color to the A input, and then the PBR to the B input. So updates the images, takes quite a while. There we go. What about a soft light here too? Let me check the reference, because the cliff faces, there might be something to it to have more of the rock color come through, because the cliff faces in the Himalayas are quite diverse in their color. They're quite colorful. And we can look at this reference again. You have yellow, black and gray, white. I mean, here too, it's quite diverse. So it might be worth keeping some of these colors, but then removing some like strength of that, like this 0.5. So there we go. Again, guys, like this is very like, I don't know how you call this kind of workflow where you're just kind of playing around, but this looks like a cool mix of colors right there. Look at that. Again, just doing something new every time, and it's looking really good here. Of course, we're gonna have to mix. I think for now we're okay here. For the rock, it might be a little too red, so we could like point hue of 5.515. There we go. That's gonna slightly take away the reds and make it a bit more rock colored, and that way we can also add maybe a bit more saturation back so it's not too overwhelming. I mean, if you look at this from a distance, this is what distant cliffs kind of look like. I mean, this is very nice detail. So let's make this something we can use. So what I'm gonna do, instead of using a slope, we're just gonna make our own slope map. We're not gonna use the AK slope map from Gaea to save VRAM. This works pretty well. We're just gonna take the normal. You can also use the true normal, and we're just gonna separate the XYZ here, and then mask out using a color ramp. Quite easy, right? There we go. Ta-da! There you have your slope map. It's super nice looking if your mesh is high res enough, and at the same time, because it follows your actual geometry, you won't have any problems if you're using the adaptive subdiv. Yeah, you know, like the actual faces selected are very much accurate to the actual geometry because they're coming straight from the geometry. I don't know if I'm making sense, but this is looking really good. I'm loving it. We might have to invert this though, because our sediment is on the bottom completely. All right, so here we have our mask, and now let's mix between them. Pretty fun, right, guys? I love texturing. It's so fun. You don't really have to follow any rules. You just kind of find the way to the end goal here. I'm loving it. It's looking very cool. I'm loving this like rock detail protruding through. It might be a little too dark. There might be some issues here, but we can also soften that fall off between the two. So I love exact numbers, so 0.75, and then we'll make this 0.45. There we go. Wow, this is looking better than my previous attempt at texturing this thing. It's looking way better already. However, now we have to make a choice. Is this the rock too dark, or is the dirt too bright? I'm guessing the rock is a little too dark, a little bit. So 0.125, and we might actually bring down the brightness on the dirt a little bit, 0.8. Yeah, this might be looking quite realistic. I mean, look at this. This is so cool. This cliff face right here, having those like different colors and minerals and shit. Minerals and shit, like Martin language. Yeah, this is super cool. I'm loving it. I'm a bit worried how this white rock is going to translate with the snow though. It might kind of cancel out the rock and you don't even see the rocky, super cool rock detail like here. it might be like hidden. So we're gonna add the snow now, but if that is a problem, we're gonna tweak this. That's why I never say there's one way to do it, because every thing has, you know, things have to be changed and tweaked. But this is looking so good. I mean, the mountain shape is helping, like in a major way, of course. It's a pretty awesome mountain shape, but wow. I think camera placement should be here. There we go. I'm using pro lens camera or something to add on, but you guys can just place the camera, bring it in. Again, change the clip start to good values here. And I normally like to use a very wide range, like a focal length, so we can see a lot. It just also adds a bit of, I don't know, realism to the image when you have like kind of a very wide focal length. Okay, we're gonna go with 18 and actually bring it in a bit. Something like this, and then bring this down, come down. By the way guys, I still have the problem where the cameras I import like are still slightly skewed on the y-axis. If you guys know what's up with that, let me know. 25. Yeah, I think this is good. And turn off depth of field, turn off the limits, and we have our camera angle. All right, so I'm going to be bringing in the snow now, which I imported the snow mask from the I imported the snow mask, so that's something. But right now what I'm going to do is just add a subsurf. I'm going to add a subsurf scattering node and mix this. I did hear that the subsurf scattering got like way slower in 5.0, so maybe you just want to use a white diffuse, but I'll just use subsurf scattering and the radius of 1111. IOR, I still need to look up what the IOR of snow is, no idea. And we just plug in our mask, boom. And there we go, snow has been added. So now I'm looking, the rock might be a little bright maybe. And that's actually a thing, it's that, you know where snow is, it means there's like a lot of water. And there is actually a point to be made that for the higher altitude, we're gonna have to darken the soil a bit because of like, well, the interaction with water and such out there. So I might darken the rock on the top there, just using a simple like height selection of our mesh and then turning down the brightness up there. But we're looking really good already. I think we want to clamp down on our snow a bit. Do we? I don't necessarily need to, I like it. I do want to clamp down on the cliffs. So I think there is a point to be made that we have to make sure. So I'm just going to copy the slope here and change these things around yet again. And maybe add a math node, set the multiply, run this through here. Maybe put this up here and put this down here. So what we're doing now is just making sure that there's no snow covering our cliffs. So we can make it really accurate. I love exact numbers, as you know. There we go. So we're just making sure that on these really steep parts there is no snow. I just like the idea that our cliffs still stay visible because they have such beautiful details, really good colors. I mean, this is looking super sweet. I might have to re-render this with the new texture I put in. Sorry, just gonna lower the noise here on the, so what I'm doing here is just lowering the noise influence on this rock bump. So I put the noise to multiply 0.2, so I'm lowering the strength. The strength of the rock bump is set to multiply 5, so it's already strong. And then I just changed the distance to 5. So we're just seeing a bit more of these lines, these stratification lines. We'll just keep increasing that, but at some point it's not gonna do much for us. Okay, I'm changing that multiplication to 7. Mostly now I'm just gonna leave that because it's looking really good already. And what we're gonna do is just make a height selection here, separate XYZ. And what we can do is just do the classic texture coordinate. Oh my god. Texture coordinate, and we'll do the object. So actually, in the case of a mesh, we can use this generated input on the separate XYZ, and then we can easily make like a height selection. Which, yeah, great, because it just goes from 0 to 1. Now the problem is if we use a height map, so we subdivide a plane and we use a displace modifier to then bring up the mountain using a texture, this won't work. Instead, what we'll have to do is take the object data, run that to the separate XYZ, take out the Z, but as you can see, it's not working. So what we have to do now is a math and divide the Z value there by the height of the mountain. So make sure you don't copy the M, or you can copy it all and then remove the M here. And there we go. If we divide this by the height of the mountain, we get our 0 to 1 value of the mountain height, so we can make a mask really accurately. So this will work for both height maps and for objects. But if you're just using a mesher, you can just use the generated and plug that directly. However, I'm going to show you guys the long way around. So here we can make a height selection. So do this and then this. And what we do then is HSV again, our best friend. And we're just going to plug that into the factor. And then the value 0.5. So we're actually like making sure that the top part here is darker than the bottom, as you can see. And what this is going to do in the final look, all those snow areas, that rock is going to be a lot darker. There we go. In my opinion, way too dark. So we can totally make that way less strong, 0.8 or 0.75, something like that. Just a little bit darker up top there. You can make the fall off a bit, 0.4 and 0.6, something like that. There we go. All this will do is just make our rock a bit more visible through the snow here, and we're looking quite good now. I think we're in a pretty strong position to be adding our atmosphere, maybe. Yeah, I think it's time to add our atmosphere. I mean, I'm loving the look of this terrain. It has so much detail, so much richness. It is a very big height map or terrain, so getting closer, we're gonna lose a lot of that detail a bit. If you want to do a 16K export, you can do it, but I don't really feel like taking all those huge gigabyte files into a tutorial. That would have been quite stressful with how slow everything would be. But yeah, super. I mean, look at this, dude. It's awesome. I do want to show you guys like a little hack. Not a hack, it's like a setup I made for the snow. So when it comes to snow, if you get closer and closer, the dusting, it starts looking more and more like, well, what it is, it's just like little pixels. It definitely holds up though. After we did the little color erosion diffusion thingy, it adds a bunch of detail to that map there, and you can see that the dusting looks a lot more natural. But I feel like we're gonna have to do a few more things. For one, I feel like it's not thick enough. So what I'm gonna do is actually bring up this snow value. So that's gonna bring a lot of the dusting, it's gonna become a lot stronger. So right now it's quite soft. It feels like a little layer of snow has fallen, and I just want to make that like a pretty thick layer. So 0.5 is gonna make that way stronger, and that's gonna look way more like the Himalayas, like a strong snow layer on this rock right here. Yeah. Yeah, it looks so much better. Way more what I was envisioning. And next to that, I want to just maybe warp it a bit, and you might be thinking, what? So what we can do here is Control T, so we're gonna add some texture coordinates. We don't necessarily need the mapping at all. We just need to have this UV here. And what we're gonna do is add a noise texture. Run this through an object, I guess. And then we're gonna oh, it's very laggy right now. Hold up, guys. There we go. Bring this all forward so we can just work in a clean space. Okay, so taking this, and we're gonna bring a mix color. then take this color and put it into the B. I'm gonna actually lower the scale here a bit, and then, oh man, you see that? Like, it's like poof, and just explode the snow into like beautiful dusting. I mean, look at that. It's kind of cool, I guess. It's one way to get very dusted snow. It's just by running a noise texture through that thing, and it just explodes your whole, yeah, UV. But it actually does work. What I just need to do is make the scale like 1000 and make this like 0, 0, 1. I can't see anything. There we go. So 0, 1. And you can see that I'm kind of blurring everything right now. And you might be like, whoa, what's happening? Yeah, so basically, oh, 1 is fine actually. So what I'm doing here is just warping the actual UV map a tiny bit, which will make the snow, like all those little pixels, which there's always to be like very low values, but all these little pixels, you know, they start to become kind of warped. It is kind of moving them as well, a tiny bit, so that's something you have to keep an eye out with. I think I tried to like maybe turn this into 40 or something, but it doesn't really work. It just shifts everything into a certain direction, which I don't have 100% control over. Yeah, 0.5 might be a good one, and then a bit more detail, or a bit more roughness, I mean, 0.6, there we go. And that just turned all of this. I keep pressing the wrong buttons because my microphone is hiding my keyboard from me. Okay, all of this to this. So yeah, does it look 100% realistic? Absolutely not. But if you're thinking like, oh, this map, this, you know, texture or whatever I'm using, it's very noticeably like pixels, and I want to just find a way to make it feel a little bit more natural rather than pixelated, then this, you know, running a noise here, so noise plugged into the object, really small scale and super small factor. You can mix it. You can also use linear light. That's another way. Linear light, actually, oh yeah, this is the OG, or this is the way that I make my blur node for the patrons. I mix it with linear light. Mixing regular does work as well. I don't know if linear light is better with the shifting. Let's see. Oh yeah, linear light actually fixes the shifting. So there you go. That's my bad there. Yeah, this is why I'm not a teacher IRL. I make too many mistakes and then find out a little bit later. There you go. So you see all those little dots, all those pixels turn into snow, like very nice looking powdered snow. And you can get quite close and it's not gonna look like, oh, pixels. So this is a good way of kind of like hiding that kind of stuff in your mask, or in any texture really. If it's low definition, you can kind of blur it and warp it inside a blender. There you go. I am saying that this terrain texture is pretty much done. It might be a little too saturated. Might make some tweaks, but first we just have to add some atmosphere. So let me just make some collections here. Not inside of each other. So I'm gonna LCA. This is my collection for like cameras, lights, you know, miscellaneous stuff. I'm gonna call this the scene collection. Not the oh my god, I can't see my keyboard. The microphone's too big. I miss recording with my phone. It was way easier. Scene, and we'll use like background. Put the mesher in there, and then you can make this like, I normally call this like scatter because I'll have like scatter objects in one. But yeah, just a little bit of cleaning up the files here. Give them more color codes. There you go. And in this, we're gonna add a Atmos section. Alrighty guys, I just want to show you guys my Patreon atmosphere setup that I made. It's pretty much just a very complex atmosphere setup, actually two of them. You have an emission based one, which is a bit legacy to be honest. This one is basically just an emission shader, which will kind of color your whole scene in a sort of atmosphere. However, it's not really, you know, realistic. It's really fast. But this upper volumetric setup is kind of made for a very controllable atmosphere setup that works perfectly with the new sky texture, but it also works with, you know, HDRIs and all that. It's extremely controllable. You can really do a lot with it, but it also just kind of works, you know. I really tweaked the settings just recently to just make it very much working out of the box in a sense, where you just drop it and you just change your lighting. Look, I am super nitpicky, so maybe you guys are too, but if you're not, I guess you can just append this into your scene and change your lighting, and then do stuff like this. Sorry, I mean, the lighting system too of Blender 5.0 is just gorgeous, but having an atmosphere system that then accurately works with it, it's very light, by the way, but it does add a layer of detail that is very necessary, and of course it adds it on top of objects in the distance. Right now, if we have a mountain in the distance, we'd see what this atmosphere actually does more, and I'll just drop it in my scene in a second too, just to kind of showcase what we can do with it. But yeah, pretty cool. I'll quickly drop it in here just to show you how easy. So append, we go to where it is, wherever you saved it, object, and just drop in the atmos. So it's already in here. Let's see how it looks in the render. It might look really dense, but you can just change stuff endlessly. However, I'm going to show you guys how to set this up. Set up a simple version of this, not a complex one. We're just going to have one that is very universal, not super controllable, but it'll do the job. It will give us atmos. All right, let's get started. In our case, we're just gonna kind of make this ourselves. We're gonna start off with a box, just not a plane, a box, there we go. Make sure that's in the center, and we're just gonna scale this thing up. I think this is gonna be okay for now. We're just gonna go into edit mode and bring it up so it's not all on the bottom here. There we go. 2,000 meters, maybe we'll add 1.5, so it's 3,000 meters. Actually, that's 2,000 should be enough. And now I'm just gonna Control or Shift Z. If you press, okay, I'm gonna scale it up, S, and then Shift Z, so we can only scale up on the X and Y axis here. I'm just gonna scale it a bunch. And at this point, we're gonna, so I'm just selecting these corners here, just gonna bevel it. It's gonna be not perfect, but I like doing it this way. I know some people just use a cylinder or something, but I'm being difficult. Apply to scale. That was huge. And then we're gonna just make sure that it's kind of have a round fall off. And I guess you could shade it smooth, doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter at all. Then we're going to make an Atmos system, so call it Atmos system or whatever. Get rid of this. Visibility. Turn off surface picking is a new option in 5.0, and that option should just be default disabled. It's super annoying actually. Anyway, so now everything is black, and we'll just add a volume scatter volume here and turn this into Rayleigh, because Rayleigh scattering is what the sky is basically. So density 0.0001, super low density. Even this is already like super foggy, right? So 0.0001. And we're gonna go into linear HSV here, Q 0.6, and saturation 8, value 8, that's all fine. So there we go, basically simple Atmos system. It gives us what we need pretty much. If you want to be more complex with this, we could actually add something else to it, which is, let's just call this Atmos. What we can do here is actually add like height controls, which would be like, you know, the same thing basically what we did for the mountain. Just generate it and then color ramp if you want it that way. Ooh, I don't know what happened there. I just turned it into a color ramp. All right, just visualize it like this, and then we can say, okay, well, we're gonna fall off from the top to the bottom. So the top here has no density, and then this like so. And then what you can do is map range it afterwards, or you can just like multiply it by this just to turn this max into a very low value and plug that into the density. So now we have like a more natural fall off of this atmosphere. So it's not just dense and then stops, it just slowly becomes less dense and then stops, which is more logical. Next, what do we want to do? Okay, we want to go into the world settings here. I totally forgot this, but what actually is really important for our lighting and the atmosphere here is the fact that we're in high altitude area, right? So 5,000 meters, boom. See that sky change? That's way more realistic for what we want. So that's actually huge. Make sure you turn your altitude to the right kind of altitude there. Now, what else is there to do? I mean, you could even lower the saturation if you think this is a little too blue for your liking. I personally like it a little bit more saturated, but to add a bit more of a stylized effect, I'm gonna add and then add shader. There we go, and then add a volume absorption. There we go. The density could be similar, but then we math, and we can add a multiply node here. So that is going to give us a bit more control about this absorption, and let's absorb something. So far it's not absorbing anything, so let's just turn this color all the way up, and then the hue, I like to absorb in the violet like area, like the purple blue. So the hue is 0.65 for that, and then you can see what happens if I turn this way up, right? It's like a filter almost over our whole world. And what this is basically it's basically more for like underwater volumetrics kind of stuff. It's taking light away, but I kind of use it as a sort of filter in the sense that this can kind of give us a sort of look, like almost like a, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain, but almost as if you're shooting on a sort of vintage camera or something. It is very light, but I personally like to add it. See, like how it's turning our scene a bit more, the blues become a bit more deep and maybe a bit more purplish than they were before. And that's just a personal little style thing I like to do. And it's very light. Don't overdo this, it's gonna look weird. If you overdo it too much too, you lose a lot of the highlights and all that. So it's something you would do very lightly, just a very slight adjustment, like 1 to 2 here, 1.5, something like that. Very, very slight. And the atmosphere, let's see, I think we're gonna add another multiply here, which is just gonna control all our strength here. So yeah, we can just really dial in the strength that we want. I think 1.25, that will be okay for now. It's not as good as the atmosphere setup I made for my own, I won't lie, I'm very used to that one. So I'm just kind of creating something super simple. But yeah, this definitely works. This is atmosphere. It's giving us a cool, nice blue hue kind of over everything, but the highlights are staying good. And it's really working with the sky. That's very important, right? So looking at it like this, super good. This is looking solid. Just gonna copy and paste this. And just let's continue this mountain range further down just to see how this atmosphere kind of plays with it. Seems to work quite well. Yeah. Again, you can add a lot more to it, a lot more custom control, I guess. But it just depends for what you need, right? And in my case, I think that this atmosphere is really beautifully covering this mountain in the distance here. It's a really good fall off, very natural. And for the size of this scene, it's quite good as well. The one thing is, it is kind of small, so maybe 20,000. Let's just turn this into 100,000, and again 100,000. I could have just done that in one go, but I'm being difficult. There we go. Just so this runs a bit deeper into the actual scene here, and we're going to actually bring the scattering down a bit. Ease. So a more soft fall off of this atmosphere. 0.8. There we go. All right. Maybe it's a bit strong. Maybe it's so back to 1, something like this. Yeah, I'm liking it. I'm liking it. Yeah, guys. Again, there's a lot of tweaking and dialing stuff in, and you know the scene that you guys saw that I made before had a lot more, you know, little tweaking, but this is just a quick getting it going kind of video, and we can already see what we're working with. And there is honestly not much more. There's not much more we have to do. Again, for this video, I'm just focusing on, you know, getting this terrain set up and started. So we're keeping it very simple in a sense. I think what I want to add next is just some extra detail on the mountain here. Yeah, some of these things are a bit too overpowering. So what we're going to do is move stuff back a bit. And we're just gonna get another concrete texture ready to go. It might seem weird, but that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna overlay that. So let me just grab another concrete texture for you. Let's see, this one has some cool details, so we're gonna add that. First, take away the saturation. I don't really want that. We could actually just add a color ramp and maybe adjust this as well. And then I'm just gonna add a mixed color, or mix it like this, but we have to switch these around. So there we go. And we're gonna just change this to soft light or overlay, or just simply multiply. Let's see, I mean, there's all kinds of ways. Screen could work, but then we have to darken this image a bunch. So let's just see. Let's get into this. Okay, the screen is making it very faded now, so it's maybe a little. I think a multiply would be in order, or an overlay. So if we do soft light, then we do need to have HSV here, just to bring it up a bunch. Let's see. So here, soft light mixing, it's just, well, you can see it's just adding a bunch more detail. However, the detail might be a little bit too strong, so maybe 0.5. So before, after, or I mean, before, after, maybe 0.75, a bit more visible. Before, after, maybe a bit smaller. And look at that terrain, also in the distance here. It's gonna add a whole layer of detail. So this is quite smooth, quite basic. It's just a little bit too smooth, right? It's just lacking a bit too much. It's lacking a little bit too much. It needs a bit more. So this layer is very subtle, but it just adds that tiny bit of extra detail. We're gonna bring it up to 0.85. And I think that's the sweet spot right there. Mix it in with the cliff textures. And I think that's looking pretty good. I think that's making this whole mountain look a lot more alive, having that extra layer. And that's pretty much what I do. I just add overlays. I do it inside of Gaea, as you saw. I do it inside of Blender, just stack up details. It's kind of similar to detailing in very close macro scenes where you're gonna add grunge layers. It's the exact same idea. You're just adding like grunge on a macro scale. But yeah, that kind of grungy detail is what it kind of turns a fake thing into a real thing. How you apply it is of course also very important. What's very important too is that you just look at your reference. Maybe something is very boring and dull, and if you follow the reference, then you'll be okay. But we see here it's looking really sweet. The shape, of course, is really good. I think that the Gaea part of this tutorial is very important. If you have a shape that doesn't really sell, or a shape that's just kind of boring, the scene will be boring. Which, by the way, boring isn't always bad. Sometimes something boring can look really realistic and good and cool. But yeah, it just has to have at least the look of what you're trying to get. So following reference and knowing how to get there is important. So the Gaea part of this tutorial, very important, of course. But the texturing, yeah, keep it simple. It doesn't have to be like a bunch of PBR textures all set to specific masks. All we really needed was a rocky mask, which we created inside of Blender. And we had the snow mask, which we warped a little bit. And then we basically put two very basic textures together, and we added the snow on top. Pretty much ready to go. Now look, if we want to get close to a terrain, it's always going to be quite difficult, right? Like, at the end of the day, there is a limit to how close you can get when you have, well, of course, a terrain that is limited in vertices. I just realized my microphone was over here this whole time. When we get closer, we also want to actually have our terrain have a bit more PBR material influence there. And you know, right now, if we get really close to the ground here, it seems quite dull, right? So if we were to actually be on this terrain, I would texture this completely differently. I would add a lot more PBR influences and use masks to mask between flows and sediment areas, with foliage areas. There's so many different ways to texture terrain for different uses. But doing that, right, all that micro detail with all these masks would actually look quite synthetic and fake when you look at a mountain from far away. The real world has a weird way of blending. So when you look at something from very far away, it has a look, and then when you get closer and everything starts, kind of becoming visible, it looks a lot different. And it's weird because when we try that in CG, where we try to texture something from like 10 meters and then we zoom out, it doesn't normally fade into the macro scale that we kind of think we would get. We really have to kind of deliberately texture something for a macro scale and then texture something for a close scale and then blend between them. Sadly, just texturing close up and then zooming out, it doesn't work. It won't look what like you want it to look like. So yeah, right now this tutorial we're really focusing on that macro scale, those big details from far away that are going to sell the scale and distance of a mountain range. But yeah, the close-up details, very close-up, you would need a lot more masks from Gaea too to get like all the flows and whatever not. And also a huge layer component, I guess, to close-up work is scattering real 3D assets. You need real rocks flowing down these slopes. If we're going to put our camera right here, we're going to need 3D objects scattered on this terrain. So yeah, there's that's why I kind of wanted to leave that out of this tutorial, because that's a whole different ball game. Like we're getting into a different thing, totally different setup. So I would say that maybe that's something I'll cover on the Patreon or on YouTube in the future if I have a good project for that. But this one was definitely just focusing on getting those big mountain terrains in your scene ready to have beautiful backdrops and awesome stuff ready to go. And I hope this was simple enough to follow along with, and yeah, patrons will get the Gaea files and stuff. So guys, that was the tutorial. I'm really thankful for all of you watching all the way to the end if you're still here, and I want to especially thank the patrons over the last year, 2 years actually, since I did like a tutorial, for just keeping that support up. Of course, I've been active there, but you guys have also really, kept this channel alive even when I just didn't have time for it. So I'm super grateful to all of you guys, and to everybody watching right now. Super happy that you guys enjoyed this, and well, I hope you enjoyed it, and that you're still here watching. And if you're interested in any assets or the files for this video, the Patreon is down below. But yeah, guys, super happy to be doing a video like this again on my own channel, and you can see me on Quad Spinner as well doing Gaea related stuff. But it's nice doing the full journey from Gaea to Blender. That's kind of what I'm known for, I guess. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching. I'll see you hopefully soon on the Patreon, or maybe in a year on the YouTube. I don't know when the next YouTube video will be.